Welcome to this roundtable discussion. My name is Viktor Jirsa. I'm a research director at Aix-Marseille University, and within the Human Brain Project, I am the leader of Work Package 1, one of the 3 science work packages in the Human Brain Project, and that contributes to the development of EBRAINS. It's my pleasure to welcome you here at this roundtable discussion, EBRAINS for Next Generation Brain Medicine. I learned that we have more than 600 people here joining us today, accompanying us, mostly early career researchers, bachelor's and master students. So I'm delighted to welcome you. And the topic that we have chosen for this roundtable is a forward-looking aspect linked to brain medicine and how EBRAINS can support this. And there are already many activities ongoing. You have heard the previous plenary presentations by Svenja Kaspers and Petra Ritter that touched upon these things already from the brain imaging perspective. So you have seen that there are activities ongoing. There is a clinical trial using some of the technology for personalizing epileptic virtual patients. There are metrics in development to measure consciousness that there is then being applied to patients, aging activities, etc. So there are going with regard to this, and we have assembled several panelists here in this group, being able to speak to this topic from different perspectives. On the one hand side, we have a neurologist, Philippe Ryvlin from Lausanne. We have a neurosurgeon, Andrius Radziunas from the Lithuanian University. We have Marja-Leena Linne, a theoretical neuroscientist from Tampere University. Borana Dollomaja, a biotech and computational neuroscience student at Aix-Marseille University. And we have a philosopher, Arleen Salles from Uppsala University. I welcome you. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I would suggest that we start this discussion with a brief self-introduction and statements relevant to the topic. Philippe, why don't you start, please?
Thank you, Viktor. I'm Philippe Ryvlin. I'm a neurologist working in Lausanne in Switzerland, more specialized in epilepsy and headache. And in HBP, I'm coordinating 2 platforms, the medical informatic platform and the human intracerebral EEG platform. The first one, the MIP, is meant to promote data sharing through what we call federation. That means connecting data set, especially from hospital, that allow to investigate them, investigate data from patient, but without centralizing those data. That is a major hurdle in clinical research, and the MIP hopefully will help us getting more easily to big data analysis in clinical neuroscience. The second platform, the HIP, want to take advantage of the incredible knowledge we can gather from directly recording the human brain, which we perform specifically in one situation, implantation of electrode in patient with epilepsy with the view to enable to operate those patients and cure them. And while we are doing that test, we can investigate a lot of brain function, normal and abnormal, and the HIP aim at gathering as many recordings as we can from this exceptional situation.
Muted, yeah. Thank you, Philippe. Let's turn to Andrius, yeah? Please, present yourself.
Yeah. Hello, thank you. My name is Andrius Radziunas. I'm a functional neurosurgeon working in Kauno Klinikos, Lithuania. I'm functional neurosurgeon working for more than 10 years with various functional disorders of nervous system. So usually, as you understand, I'm operate these patients. Usually what I do neuromodulation therapies, such kind of deep brain stimulation or resective surgeries for epilepsy patients. Usually we have about 15 subcortical structures for neuromodulation therapies, such as subthalamic nucleus, globus pallidus internus, etc. Yeah, so we usually quite have a struggle when we're looking a best target for different pathologies. So that would be a great thing if we would have a virtual brain model which would help us to determine which target is the best for particular patients. Because, as you know, neuroanatomy is varying quite a lot. So I think that EBRAINS and the virtual brain model would be very helpful in this situation. So that's my main points, actually.
Thank you, Andrius. You already addressed quite a number of relevant topics important for this discussion here. You mentioned also brain model. We have an expert brain modeler here on the panel, Marja-Leena. Would you please take the word?
Thanks, Viktor, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marja-Leena Linne, and I'm an electrical engineer and a neuroscientist studying the roles of glial cells in neuronal circuits and synapses, as well as in brain signals like fMRI. I'm leading a research group, as Viktor said, at Tampere University in southern Finland, and we are located in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Technology, where we integrate biology, medical sciences, engineering, and computation to understand the brain. I have myself been involved with the Human Brain Project almost from the beginning, and as was mentioned, mostly doing theoretical neuroscience, developing models of astrocyte functions, first of all, and also developing the EBRAINS platform by contributing these models to model catalog for later use by others. In our very recent modeling study in the HBP published in PLOS Computational Biology last year, we predicted for the first time ever the dynamics of complex astrocyte-mediated molecular signaling mechanisms that underlie long-term plasticity and learning in developing somatosensory cortex. And this has links to neurodevelopmental disorders. We know that synaptic mechanisms are likely involved in many neurodevelopmental disorders like schizophrenia and autism, and we are also starting to look at these by models. Currently, we are applying these models. We have developed a knowledge to understand how astrocytes and neurons interact with the vascular system in the brain, for example, in neuroinflammation, which is seen in many neurological and neurodevelopmental disorders and conditions. And how I see that this modeling is useful in the future in brain research and in understanding disease conditions, and especially how EBRAINS is useful is at least in three ways. We can first of all use data from data repositories in EBRAINS to develop new hypotheses and keep complementing and adding the new components in the models. We can also use previously developed models, as I said, from model catalog to improve our models. And then most importantly, we can use different tools to automatically validate our models. And this is what I see is the usefulness of EBRAINS in the future when we try to understand the human brain and both in health and disease.
Thank you, Marja-Leena. Very concise. Let's turn to Borana. Borana, welcome. Please join us.
Yes, thank you, Viktor, and good afternoon, everyone. So I am Borana. I am a PhD student in Aix-Marseille University. I am now focused in studying stimulation as therapy for epileptic patients that are resistant to medicine. So epilepsy is a brain disease that affects over 50 million people worldwide. It's about 1% of the world population, and 1/3 of these people are resistant to drugs, and therefore numerous efforts are being done in research, in brain medicine research in particular, to find solutions and alternatives to these patients. Current solutions are resective surgery, but now we are looking into more minimally invasive or even non-invasive solutions to this, and stimulation would be one of these solutions. Previously, I have studied engineering in applied mathematics and computer science. So as you can see, I come from this different background, and I am now into the field of computational neuroscience. And the exciting thing about this field is that it is quite multidisciplinary. It requires people from many, many different disciplines to come together. And I think EBRAINS is a platform that will allow and actually make it much more easier for people of different backgrounds to collaborate, to work together into this big collective effort that is to understand the brain and to have better solutions in terms of brain medicine innovation for patients. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Borana. Reality check. This is a research institute, but we are right next to the hospital, and the helicopter is landing and for the emergencies. Yeah. So, Arleen, please, the word is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Victor, and hello, everyone. My name is Arleen Salles. I am a senior researcher at Uppsala University, and in the Human Brain Project, I am the acting leader of Work Package 9, which is a work package that focuses on responsible research and innovation. So I will be actually briefly talking about ethical and societal considerations when it comes to EBRAINS. The fact is that neuroscientific research in general captures the imagination and the support of the public, and it does so not just because it tells us what we are and how we think, but also because it is able to begin to address a public health priorities such as brain health. And the intention is for the knowledge provided to alleviate the burdens involved in brain illness, brain disease. Now, EBRAINS modeling tools and services and the data it provides, they're all intended to increase efficiency and productivity of the research. Therefore, it promises to further increase our understanding of the brain and enrich prevention, diagnosis, and treatments for a number of conditions. The goal, as you know, is to translate the latest scientific discoveries and innovations in medicine and industry for the benefit of the patient or of patients. So because of this, and because of the different disciplines EBRAINS draws from, big data, neuroscience, robotics, computing, and so on, there is awareness of the need to have EBRAINS as an infrastructure that is socially acceptable, and it's also ethically sustainable and morally desirable. So this is definitely a priority. Now, in the HBP, we have the research has been shaped by a framework, which is the framework of responsible research and innovation. And this has allowed us to integrate philosophical, ethical, and sociological reflection in a way that the goals of HBP research are aligned with the values and needs of European societies. So this has meant that we have created ethical structures, mechanisms, and activities geared towards enhanced awareness of ethical issues and implications, better understanding and management of the issues beyond compliance, because we do have to comply with a number of ethical and legal guidelines just because we're an EU-funded project. So when it comes to EBRAINS, we really have ambitious ethical expectations. And that means that we're committed to undertaking activities that will lead to what we can call a culture of ethics, where managers, providers, users are able to understand and engage with ethical issues and their implications, to see the infrastructure as one that is responsibly managed, and that are compliant with relevant legislations and regulations. So ultimately, we expect and we hope that we will be able to deliver an infrastructure that is excellent, not only when it comes to the science, but also when it comes to understanding what responsible research is. Thank you.
Thank you, Arleen. Very concise and actually important. I wish to highlight here that the Human Brain Project, and linked to this EBRAINS, is the only large-scale project I'm aware of that is actually putting emphasis on the ethical aspects of the research, and especially in our discussion that we are already having here with regard to brain medicine, because it's an ICT infrastructure in support of brain medicine and clinical applications. And maybe to continue in this direction, Philippe and Andrius, from your perspective as our clinical experts and panelists here, EBRAINS in support of the next generation brain medicine. What are the most important factors from your perspective as a clinician that EBRAINS has to satisfy in order to be meaningful and useful for clinical applications and for brain medicine? Yeah, from your perspective. It's a complex question, but maybe you can share your first impressions with us. Philippe, why not starting with you?
Well, I'd like to focus on one message, which is to me the most important. We need the platform to provide the incentive for people to share data. And the incentive needs to include the capacity that researcher and clinician will be able to use the platform to perform their own research with the platform. If the platform is only available to a few very high-level data scientists, it's unlikely that most clinician and clinical researcher will be willing to share the data. So we really need, first of all, to create a community where clinical researchers feel that they belong to that community and have the capacity to use a platform. To me, that's the most important aspect.
How does that relate to getting your own data on the platform, to treat your own data? Wouldn't be this aspect also relevant, because as a clinician researcher, you want to treat your own data? Yeah. What are the limitations, or what are the capacities of EBRAINS at the moment?
Well, there is some capacities, but definitely there is also a need to improve some of the data privacy and data safety aspect. But this is not the most complicated. Again, to me, the most important factor is how you make the user interface accessible to most people who have the capacity to share data, who have data, and also have question, hypotheses, ideas. It's not just a question of working on your own data. We really want to promote data sharing, but it needs to be reciprocal. I share my data with others who will analyze them. In return, I want to be able to also analyze the data from others, and myself, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is very clear. So essentially, in order to answer my question, EBRAINS should be a platform, an environment, or an ecosystem would be another word, that enables multi-user access to work together on multiple data sets, or exactly. The same data sets, even this. Yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah. Andrius, you have a slightly different the daily routine in clinics as a neurosurgeon. What would be your expectations in this context?
Yeah, I fully agree with Philippe, of course. And what I would add, actually, as a clinician perspective, yeah, as my talk was regarding just to have such kind of tool for help tool for neurosurgeons to help with the brain surgeries, any kind of surgeries. As we know, and we already saw from the plenary session from Professor Ritter, talk that the EBRAINS already is used for the different pathologies, as a brain tumor resections simulation, and even with the DBS for STN stimulation and so on. So of course there are many more diseases to treat, of course, and we definitely as young doctors and young researchers are looking forward for such tool which would help us to people to analyze our hypotheses and maybe to try them directly on simulations, and then to try them to translate into the practice. That's I think the most exciting thing with the EBRAINS.
Thank you, Andrius. I'm having a list of questions here, but I'd like to encourage the audience, please use the question and answer interface to type the questions in, and I will essentially pick them up, try to cluster them, or if there are too many, to summarize them, and then introduce them, inject them into the discussions here. Yeah. So, Andrius, you talk about interventions, but in order to and you mentioned the virtual brain. There are this is already being used, as Petra Ritter mentioned, that for some surgical approaches. But in order to do this, clinical trials need to be performed. Yeah, in order to correctly validate the approaches and the novel technologies. Yeah, in terms of validation from a clinician's perspective, what is required in order to provide confidence? What type of validation from your perspective is being required in order to provide the clinician the confidence to use it in a daily routine? What are your expectations on this? What does EBRAINS have to do? Does EBRAINS have to launch a number of clinical trials? Or how do you see this? And again, a question to both Philippe and Andrius, please.
Yes, of course. The validation is most important thing, because as a clinician, I see the stride forward that you have to use it in the clinical trials. Yeah, you have to see how it works in the clinical settings. Of course, that might be. Of course, at the beginning, just a simulations. Then you towards to clinical settings, but just not as a primary how to say decision maker, but you as a doctor just making decisions. And at the beginning, it's just some kind of advisory tool. It might be, and then if you see that it helps more and more, and then you can trust this kind of simulation, then you just going to that tool with fully how to say just.
Viktor, I will add that eBrain offers something unique. That is different tools that enable to create a virtuous cycle of the different way you can tackle a medical question and test a hypothesis. That is, on the one hand, develop clinical trial, especially if you need to use some digital tool like the virtual brain. And the fact of having access to a lot of data through the federation we have created can help recruiting the patient. But then, once you have the result of a clinical trial, you want to interpret those results. And the simulation and modeling tool that are available can help, of course, to perform this to progress in those interpretation. And the fact of being able to also get a lot of observational data is another important way to complement this approach. And that creates a cycle from the simple observation to testing a hypothesis with a clinical trial and then moving to interpretation by building and refining model. So I think that's really a unique strength of EBRAINS to offer all those panels, complementary panel, to promote progress in medicine.
I actually could not agree more with you. This integrative capacity and interoperability is essentially one of the biggest points that we have in EBRAINS. Yeah, Marja-Leena, I have received a question here on validation from your perspective. As a modeler, validation on your side may mean something else than for the clinician. Can you please comment on this? And in link with EBRAINS, what are your expectations and what can EBRAINS do for you as a modeler, the models that you're providing for the next generation brain medicine, please?
Yes, this is a good point. And when we do these basic science models, we of course need to validate every model. And many times it happens in such a way that we just visually without any quantitative tools, we validate the model against perhaps some data trace on a publication. But in the future, I expect that once we keep collecting more data in the EBRAINS, we can do several validation steps for models and kind of give stamps to models how good they are in predictive capacity. And there I expect that in the EBRAINS we start accumulating more tools where we can do automatically this kind of quantitative comparison without having need to program ourselves everything from the beginning. And then also we can address better the reproducibility issue. If everyone is running the same model using same tools, like different models using same tools against the same data. So then we can better also compare different models and make a decision which model is the best one to give the best predictive capability from the basic science perspective. And then this again supports the clinical research. And the value of EBRAINS in my mind is that we have both the basic biological data and models existing there and also the clinical data and clinical models. And they can communicate together better when they are inside the same system.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. In this context, actually, I have a question here. What is missing in the models in order to make them most effective and predictive at the moment and in the future? So, or said differently, specifically for the clinical applications, what is it that is most effective and predictive in the virtual brain platform and now and in the future? So essentially, what do we need to add into the models? Marja-Leena.
Definitely, as I already mentioned, we need to add the glial components there, and not only the astrocytes that I talked about, but microglia, oligodendrocytes, and such. So in addition to neuronal components, we need these glial components. We need to, one way or another, describe also extracellular matrix and some other brain elements in order to understand brain disorders. And we have to realize that for these other than neuronal components, we don't even have good representative models so far. We are developing them and we are collecting data and validating models. So this is one important aspect, like from the biological perspective. But as I said, also the validation tools, how you compare different models that are perhaps developed with they have different details. Some are more dynamically producing the brain phenomena, some address it more mechanistically. So we have to have a way how we compare these and validate against data. So these two issues are very important for the future development.
You essentially mentioned what is missing in the models, but that gets us back to the validation and essentially to the integrative ecosystem that Philippe referred to earlier. This can be overwhelming. in a sense, because there are so many different elements. And the questions I'm looking at here is, how can we learn this actually to handle this complexity, to enter into this ecosystem? Can EBRAINS Atlas use for students to learn? Can this be used as a tool? Or if I'm a brain medicine researcher and student, how can I use this? Yeah. So educational aspects, and maybe Borana, maybe I can turn there to you to share your experiences with us and see what your recommendations are actually to the audience, how to get lost in this complexity the best and survive.
Yes, indeed. The field of neuroscience as a whole is quite complex. The approaches are multiple, and the efforts, well, when you look at it, are immense. So EBRAINS is trying to get all of these efforts into one single infrastructure, and of course, this is it's complicated to do, but I think it is a good way for even for students to have a better idea of the different types of efforts that are being led in brain medicine research. EBRAINS allows this because, well, it is the collective effort of multiple labs across Europe. EBRAINS allows for students to have an interactive platform where they can learn in function of what direction they want to go into in their brain research studies. It has not only interactive notebooks with ready-made code and simulations and models. It has data that they can access easily, and they can do their own analysis on it. It has a variety of different software that the students can learn from, and also something quite relevant to the student. It also can give them an idea of where this research is being done, which are the labs that the student should get more interested in if they want to pursue a certain field in brain medicine research. So I think EBRAINS has a big capacity to be this window of opportunity for a student that would like to dive into a certain research path in brain medicine. And even myself, as a student in brain medicine research, EBRAINS is useful for me to go and look at research that is being done in other labs other than the one that I am in. The team I am working with is more concentrating on the theoretical aspects of neuroscience, but our work is very related, and it actually needs the perspective of biologists. It needs this different perspective so that it can actually, well, we can validate our work and be able to move forward. And I think EBRAINS is exactly there for that. It allows for us to do this, to move forward, to learn from others, and also showcase our work.
Thank you, Borana. That was actually very insightful, and it especially in these times where we are suffering from a pandemic. Look at us, we're not together here around the round table, we are in the front of a square screen, yeah, and we cannot travel. Ecosystem, a virtual ecosystem allowing to interact with other people within the EBRAINS platform and getting access to other people's data, tools, exchanges, and direct first-hand effects. I consider this to be wonderful, and that actually asks for a culture change, because at least my generation is not has not grown up with that, and EBRAINS in this case also nurtures a new culture of interactions. Yeah? So that's a very good point. Yeah. There is a question to Arleen. What are the most frequent ethical challenges you experience within EBRAINS, please? Mike, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what are we expected though? What are the challenges we're expected to experience? It seems to me, and I've been thinking about what my colleagues have been saying, which is absolutely important and fascinating. And we have been talking about providing confidence to the medical community, so they use EBRAINS. We have been talking about how students can really understand that EBRAINS is going to help them. And I think we have to focus again, and one of the challenges is to forget society, to forget that there are others there who are going to be impacted by the research and who are going to be positively, by the way, hopefully positively impacted by the research, but still there are going to be implications. So I think that challenges, of course, the most typical challenge is data privacy and protection. And this is something that the HPP and EBRAINS will have the adequate mechanisms to address that kind of concern. We do now, and we have a data governance working group that is very active, and there will be a DPO, and there will be, again, privacy protection mechanisms in EBRAINS. So I'm not particularly, it is a concern, it is a challenge, definitely, but I think that we have the mechanisms to be able to manage that challenge. But there may be others, again, that have to do with what will be the public's perception of the infrastructure? How do we minimize risk of concerns about the infrastructure, what it can do and what it cannot do? And that's why we are actively working towards creating the kind of mechanisms that will allow EBRAINS to become a trusted infrastructure, and again, one that is perceived as responsible and aware of its ethical dimension. So I would say right now, and again, we can probably, I could take a couple of hours just listing potential issues or challenges, but I think that so far they're very much manageable, but that also means that we have a huge task ahead, because we are expected to deliver in a couple of years, we're expected to deliver a fully sustainable, from an ethical standpoint, infrastructure. We will, but that's part of the job right now. So, yeah.
Thank you. You are actually making the circle. You're closing the circle to the discussion we had before in terms of ethically sustainable infrastructure, and that we have an ethical responsibility to generate trust in the community. And that maybe what I know it's a deep issue, but could you please address the issue of how EBRAINS can facilitate decisions in some ethically challenging cases? Because we talked about the use of these tools that are in EBRAINS for clinical decision-making, uncertain diagnosis or prognosis. Can ethics provide guidance in this beyond the science? Can ethics provide some guidance of best use of these tools?
Yes, of course. I think I do believe that EBRAINS has the potential for really minimizing ethically troubling situations, and one of those has to do again with uncertainty. In the medical setting, one of the situations in which that is more likely to produce ethical issues is uncertainty. For example, in the diagnosis. And diagnostic uncertainty is a huge issue because it involves suddenly, obviously, the patient, family members, how to communicate, what to say, and importantly, what to do. And what EBRAINS promises to do is minimize the uncertainty, because it is going to provide a set of tools and services that are intended to provide more knowledge and more opportunities for understanding more about the brain and about a particular condition. So to that extent, I think EBRAINS can really help us ethicists, because it might allow us to not have some issues that right now are proving very difficult to solve. So yes, it can.
Thank you, Arleen. Sorry, I need to, we are at the end. Sorry, Philippe, we arrived at the end. There are many questions popping up. We need to stop because there are other sessions upcoming. I want to thank all of you, all the panelists, and all the questions. There are more and more coming. It's what you see, it's early days for EBRAINS. Yeah. And it provides great opportunity for us to work together in an ecosystem that lays the ground for future applications in brain medicine, and actually that requires a culture change for us. And this is what I'm hearing from you. This is what I'm feeling myself. it comes also with a responsibility of the community. And I'm turning to the audience, please. EBRAINS is being co-developed together with engineers, clinicians, and scientists. And there your contributions are being requested. Yeah, contribute, use it, help to co-develop EBRAINS. Yeah? I thank you very much, all of you, and until hopefully very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.